Okay, final exam review, part 1. So numbers 1 and 2, we're going to simplify radicals. In number 1, we have the 7th root of 640 n to the 5th. Well, I'm looking for 7 of a kind. Okay, so I know that my n to the 5th is not going to do anything. I can't pull any out because I don't have at least 7 n's there to deal with. I only have an n to the 5th. I would have to have an n to the 7th or greater in order to be able to pull any of the n's out. However, the 640 I can start factoring, so I'll go the easy route and say 64 and 10, and then I'm going to break that down further. We'll go 8 and 8, and then 8 of course breaks down into 2 and 4, 4 breaks down into 2 and 2, 8 breaks down into 2 and 4, 4 breaks down into 2 and 2, and then 10 breaks down into 2 and 5. So that's my prime factorization. So if I look, I see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2's, which is perfect. I'm looking for 7 of a kind, and I got it. I've got 7 2's. Okay, so I'm going to indicate here that I've got 7 2's. And what that means now is that I can pull a 2 to the outside. Okay, and the only thing that's left is my other prime factors, which I only have one. I only have a prime factor of 5. So that means I bring a 2 to the outside. My other prime factor that I don't have 7 of just stays on the inside. So 2 times the 7th root of 5 n to the 5th. Okay, and there's nothing else that I can do with that. Number 2, now we've got a cubed root, so this time I'm looking for 3 of a kind. Now the first thing I notice is that I'm taking the cubed root of a negative number. Well, the only way that I can get a negative here is if I do -1 times -1 times -1. So I know right away that I can bring -1 to the outside. Then I'm going to break down the 250. So 250 breaks down into 25 and 10. 25 breaks down into 5 and 5, and 10 breaks down into 2 and 5. Well, again, I'm looking for 3 of a kind. This time I've got 3 5's. So I'll draw a little circle around my 3 of a kind right there, and I know that I can bring a 5 to the outside as well. So far I've got a -1 times a 5. I'm going to have a 2 left over, because that's my other prime factor that I wasn't able to get 3 of a kind of. And then for n to the 8th, well, about the best way that I can break that down into smaller chunks is I can do n squared times n squared times n squared times n squared. Okay, and that gives me 3 n squareds of a kind with 1 n squared left over. And there's nothing else I can do with that. So I can bring an n squared to the outside. Okay, I still have an n squared left over on the inside, and I have a 2 left over on the inside, and this is what I have on the outside. So that would be the cubed root of 2 times n squared. So then altogether, -1 times 5 times n squared would be -5 n squared times the cubed root of 2n squared. Just barely able to get that to fit. Okay. Now, converting from exponential form to rational exponent form, or rational exponent form into radical form, and radical form into rational exponent form, fairly simple. When we're going from this form, radical form, into rational exponent form or exponential form, all I do is I look at the root. Okay, whatever the root is becomes the denominator of my rational exponent, and whatever the exponent is becomes the numerator of my rational exponent. So then I just take what's on the inside of the radical, so 2p, and My numerator is 5 over my denominator, because it's a square root, is 2. Okay, that's all I have to do with that. For number 4, this time my numerator is 4, because that's the exponent, and my denominator is 5, because that's the radical. So I have m to the 4 over 5. And again, I'm done. Okay, now going the other direction, this time we're going to put it into radical form, so the opposite is true. So that means that the numerator now becomes my exponent, and my denominator becomes my radical. So I have the 5th root of k raised to the 3rd power. Okay. Again, 3 is my exponent here for number 9. 2 is my radical. So that means that I have the square root of 5x raised to the 3rd. Okay. Okay, numbers 7 and 8 just say simplify. So for number 7, I've got k to the 4/5 times k to the 5/3, all raised to the 2nd power. So I'm going to start on the inside. If I've got two like bases, as long as I have like bases, I can add the exponents together. I just need to make sure that we've got common denominators. So I can change that to k to the 15/12 times k to the 20/12 squared, which would then reduce to k to the 35/12 squared. And then a power of a power means that I'm going to multiply. So 35/12 times 2 gives me k to the 70/12. And then I can reduce that, both 70 and 12. Well, we'll start by dividing them by 2, or reducing them by a factor of 2, so that would be 35/6. And let's see, 35 is only divisible by 7 and 5, and 6 is only divisible by 2 and 3, so that is as reduced as that gets. For number 8, now we're simplifying radicals. Now we notice that we can only combine like terms here, and since we only have a radical 6 here and a radical 6 here, and that's 2 radical 6 minus 2 radical 6, means that those are just going to cancel out and go to 0, and all I'm going to be left with is negative 3 radical 5. Okay. Numbers 9 and 10 are performing operations on functions. Number 9 is just addition of functions, so we have f of n plus g of n. So all I do is just plug in. So my f of n is negative 3n minus 4 plus my g of n, which is negative 3n squared plus 2. And I just combine like terms. Well, negative 3n squared doesn't have anything to match up with. Negative 3n doesn't have anything to match up with. And negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. And that's all I can do. Now a composition function, g of h of x, means that I'm going to take h of x and I'm going to plug it in for x in g of x. So in other words, I'm going to take this whole function right here, negative 2x minus 3, and I'm going to plug it in for the x in 4x minus 4. So I take 4 and then I plug in negative 2x minus 3 minus 4. Okay, so I just took this, the 4, x, I plugged in negative 2x minus 3, and then minus 4, minus 4. So now I go through and simplify. So that would be negative 8x minus 12 using the distributive property, minus 4 bringing down that term, and then combine like terms. So negative 8x minus 16. That does it for part 1 and the first page of the final exam review.